Welcome into the program. We're back. It is week, I think, 5 of this show. Week 6 of college football. Andy Baxter on the other side of that screen. Spencer Holbrook here. Andy, let's get into it, man. How are you feeling about week 6 of college football?
Feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good about Maryland coming to town for homecoming weekend. I was watching Mike Loxley speak this week, and he said that this is one of 4 homecoming games that Maryland has to play in this year. And he was asked about that. He's like, I guess it's just the luck of the draw. It's hard not to think, though, that teams, I know it's a university scheduling when homecoming weekend is, but that is just some bad luck if you're Maryland to have that many games in one season, especially when Maryland's playing particularly well. It's not like this is a gimme game for Ohio State, and it's not a gimme game for anyone else in the conference.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Like how how does that happen for a program? I don't think Ohio State's ever anybody's homecoming, and there's good reason for that. That might change with the way that the Big Ten scheduling's come out. We'll get into that and a lot more in the hour that we're going to be here. That schedule, man. Interesting stuff coming out of the Big Ten office today. Maybe we can just start there. Not really something that I figured that we would talk about, but a good place to start. Just because while Maryland is looming, the Big Ten decides to drop its schedule for the season and the 2024 season and 25, 26, 27, and 28. So we got the next 5 years of Ohio State is now on the books. Don't know when those games are going to happen, but know who they're going to play. And the headliner for now, Buckeyes are heading to the Pacific Northwest for the first time since 2007. They'll play Oregon next year on the road, Washington on the road in 2025 with UCLA coming to town, USC in 2026, and then head out to Pasadena for 2027 to play against UCLA in the Rose Bowl. Some interesting quirks in that schedule, man. No Penn State for a couple years in a stretch. Got Michigan every year, but that's the only protected rivalry. Like some interesting stuff going on in there.
Yeah, and what's funny, not even Ohio State related, but Big Ten related with this schedule release. Iowa in 2027 hosts both USC and UCLA, I believe, and that is just hilarious content to me. I don't know, man. I think that's just good stuff. But yeah, Oregon. The last time these teams met was 2021. Everyone knows that game in Columbus, 28-35. Ohio State on the losing end of that one. So I guess it's a good thing for this program to be able to get another stab at Oregon. Both teams will look pretty different, obviously, for this matchup in 2024. I believe in the first scheduling model that came out, the first Flex Protect, I still don't know why it's called Flex Protect, but I think in the first model of this, wasn't Ohio State supposed to play UCLA in 2024?
Yes.
So yeah, that's the change that caught my eye. No longer playing UCLA in 2024. Await on those California schools. Instead, playing Oregon, the late edition, along with Washington in this new set for the 18-10, 18 team Big Ten. It's a mouthful because it shouldn't be one. It should be called the Big 18 or whatever. Just something, not the Big Ten. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a good thing for Ohio State ultimately. It's probably best for the powers of this conference. I don't know if I still like the fact divisions. Like, I don't see how this is totally going to work in terms of, feeling like you're playing everyone at the same time. I know that there's the goal over the course of the next 5 years so that you do play everyone. It just feels wrong to me. I don't know. I like divisions. I like the geographic component to it. And even if it's not going to be geographic, having some sense of like, hey, these teams play these teams every year and these teams play these teams every year makes more sense to me than not, I guess.
I thought it was weird that Iowa has three protected rivals and USC and UCLA are their only protected rivals. Like, how is Washington and Oregon not playing USC and UCLA every year? Like, what are we doing there? Oregon Washington's protected, but Oregon USC's not, and Oregon UCLA's not. Washington UCLA and Washington USC's not. Like, those schools still want to play each other. Now I get the like, hey, you made your bed and laying it. Like you left that conference. Now you're not a part of that conference. You're a part of this one. So you got to start playing everybody. But like, man, I think USC plays at Rutgers next year. Like that's gonna talk about just a wild ride. Like the flight from LA to Newark for the Rutgers game is going to be pretty interesting. Like, just so many scheduling quirks, man. Like, I I'm interested in it. I love the matchups that we're going to get out of this new conference. But like, do Iowa and Minnesota and even like Wisconsin, like, do they have anything to play for now starting next year when like the Big Ten West isn't up for grabs? And you're basically like, hey, the top two teams are just going to duke it out for the Big Ten championship, and the rest of y'all are going to just do whatever. Like, there's this point of pride of winning a division, right? And that kind of goes away now. And a large chunk of this conference is basically going to be playing for nothing because the bowl system is not going to be the same either.
Yeah, I guess what is interesting I've been thinking about because the ACC already moved to no divisions this year, and right now there's 5 ACC teams in the top 25. And the ACC is more relevant this season than it has been the last few years, really since the Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson kind of era, if you will. If you go back a few
Mm-hmm.
years to like the 2016, 2017, maybe 2018, if you want to include Trevor Lawrence in that time frame. So it's working for the ACC so far, but then again, the ACC is only 14 member institutions. If you want to, because they play a certain number of ACC teams per year, it's 15, but that's not 18, right? So it is different. You know, the ACC had the same issue with the Coastal being very weak and being up for grabs
Mm-hmm.
every year, and same thing with the Big Ten West. So it's not like a terrible comp, but I do think when you have 18 and the members that were added to the Big Ten for next year, UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon, it's not like what the ACC is adding and SMU and the others that they're bringing in, Cal, Stanford. Like
What are we
it's a
doing?
different tier. So, but it's a different tier. You know what I mean? And for the
Mm-hmm.
ACC right now, you're still at 14, really, and so it's not 18. So that's why I think it's working for the ACC. That's why I think it's good for Louisville. You know, like you don't have to play. It used to be Clemson, but now it's like even FSU. Like you don't need to play the power of your conference every year. But for the Big Ten, it's like I agree with you. Like, how does this help anyone that's in that bottom layer of this conference? If anything, it just makes them even more relevant. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how it pans out.
Yeah, like the Purdue just won a Big Ten West title. Like, that means something to that program. Michigan State's won a Big Ten championship because it recruited well and did some things right for a couple years. Like, why did they vote on all of this? Like, who advised them that this was going to be good for them? I don't know, man. Like, I could talk for a legitimately an hour about this whole new Big Ten thing, and we will. I like to continue doing this Thursday night thing um, in the off season. That's great talk for the off season. But this is actually, Andy. I don't know if you know this. This is not the off season because Ohio State on Saturday, less than 48 hours away, plays against Maryland. The Terps come to town undefeated, 5-0 for the first time since 2001 when they went 10-2, won the ACC, and played for, I believe, the Orange Bowl. Um, I'm here to go out on a limb and say that Maryland will not win the Big Ten this year. But the Terps are pretty good. And I think they're going to give Ohio State somewhat of a challenge. We're not going to give score predictions here because we do that at bold predictions on Friday. But like, there's a good chance that Maryland does a couple things against Ohio State, and I'm pretty excited to watch this matchup. What do you think?
Yeah, Maryland's one of those teams where having no divisions might actually help them because right now they're
Hmm.
stuck in the Big Ten East with the big bad bloods of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. And I saw a stat this week. It's in the last 20 games total, not Big Ten play, just 20 games total. Maryland has the fourth best record among Big Ten teams, and the other three are the ones I just mentioned, the regular powers, if you will, of the conference. So Maryland is 15-5 in its last 25-0 to start this year, as you mentioned. I agree. This could be an interesting game, an entertaining game. I don't necessarily expect an upset special, but it could be something where, we have a game going into halftime like last year when Maryland was up 13-10. This Maryland team has Ohio State's attention, I think in part because of how close last year's game was. I was looking back at the play-by-play of last year, of like how it all in the game cast and how it all unfolded. I had forgotten that the reason why it was 30-33, Maryland was trailing, I think, with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, was because they got a touchdown to make it, I believe, 30-21, and then they returned a blocked PAT or at some point to make it, or something like that. Basically, they returned a blocked PAT touchdown game, then they scored to make it a 3-point game. And it's just like there was so much going on in that game. Everything,
Mhm.
even special teams. Like Lathan Ransom breaks his thumb and then blocks a punt later in the game. Obviously, like I just said, Maryland had a crucial special teams 2-point return, which you don't really see in college football or football in general that often. There was just a lot of events. I mean, the game ended with Zach Harrison having back-to-back sacks and Steele Chambers recovering the second one for the game-sealing touchdown. So the final score was, I believe, 43-30, but it really was closer than that. It was 36-30 with Maryland having one last chance at a potential
Yeah,
game-winning drive.
yeah. Well, I knew the Buckeyes were in trouble when I had like a 13-minute conversation with one of the assistants on the field before the game, and a staff member on the field before the game. And it's like you're not usually chatting before games, and the Buckeyes were on to Michigan at that point, and they hadn't even kicked off against Maryland, and that's not an excuse for what happened there. They shouldn't have been that close, and they really didn't play well. Um, but when you got a game like Michigan on the horizon, you tend to look forward to that, and I think the Buckeyes did in a big way last year. So this year, I don't think that'll be an issue, especially coming off the off week, the idle week, and going into Purdue next week, which has been a house of horrors for Ohio State. We'll get into that next week. But I really don't think that the Terps are going to catch them by surprise at all, especially being 5-0. If this team was 4-1 even, or 3-2, like a normal Maryland team would be, I think maybe Ohio State wouldn't be really up for this game. But I think that you'll get the Buckeyes full effort, and Maryland's got their full undivided attention, I think, right now.
Well, you mentioned that going to Purdue, that's a house of horrors for Ohio State. Columbus and the shoe has been a house of horrors for Maryland. You pointed out earlier this week that the last two times Maryland's been in the shoe, Ohio State scored an average of 69.5 points per game. Now, of course, things are a little bit different with the clock, fewer possessions now for Ohio State. That's also because they haven't been as efficient and because teams are playing in a way that's controlling the clock. But it's also different because Maryland has a much better team. Mike Locksley in the fifth year now. That scheme is pretty set in stone. Jim Knowles even said this week, like they're not doing a lot different offensively. They're just a lot better at it. So Maryland is a different team. They've got some of the same guys. I mean, Taulia Tagovailoa we'll talk about a lot, I'm sure, in this show. He's still there. He's been their starter since 2020, and he has pretty much every record you could ever have for a program as far as passing records go for a quarterback. So they've got some stability in scheme, in their leaders offensively, also some new faces too in some of those skill positions. But overall, Maryland is definitely taking steps in the right direction. Like I feel like this is the way you build a mid-tier program.
That's the first key to this. I think I've got the spelling correct. I've spelled uh if I don't, I'm sorry, but I've spelled Talia Tagovailoa's name quite a few times. And man, like you slow him down, you slow Maryland down, basically. Like he's not the entire offense, but he's kind of the entire offense, right? Like if we know Talia Tagovailoa and you're not going to be that successful, I think the backup is Brian Edwards Jr., who I don't think is a Billy Edwards Jr. I don't think is a bad player, but I also don't think is the kind of player that can walk into the horseshoe and do a lot of damage. Whereas Talia, like, if you're not playing well or your secondary misses an assignment, they're going over the top for an 80-yard touchdown, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So, like, that's the first key to the game here, as we officially get into it. Keys to the game, and then can Ohio State slow down Talia Tagovailoa? Like, if you slow him down, you will win. If you don't, you will be in a dogfight. I still don't think Maryland can stop Ohio State, and we'll get into that. But the first key, first and foremost, is keeping him in the pocket and not letting him create plays.
Yeah, I wrote about that today for lettermenrow.com, and I was looking
Mhm.
back at what he's done this season and going back into his other games. I was looking at the Indiana game, which was last week, Michigan State game, and UVA game. So basically, the last three games. We're not going to include Towson and Charlotte because it's not really great to study those, just not as relevant. So those three games, he does a lot outside the pocket. Like if they can't keep him in the pocket, that's where he's most dangerous. Is when he's extending outside of it, outside of that tackle box, and especially on play action. I mean, I was looking at his play action stats, and it's like kind of scary good. We've talked a little bit on the show about how good JJ McCarthy is for Michigan on play action, but Talia Tagovailoa is almost perfect on play action right now. He's got 0 sacks on play action, even though he's holding the ball for more than 3 seconds per drop back. He's got 5 big time throws, which is, I think there's only 7 quarterbacks nationally that have more than that, according to PFF. 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and then 0 turnover worthy plays on play action. So he has basically been flawless on play action this season. And yes, he can extend plays without play action. That's when he's made more mistakes, actually. So for Ohio State, eye discipline is going to be huge for these defenders. Not only fishing out if it's a run or pass, because they run a lot of these RPOs, and it's difficult because Taulia has the option to pull it and pass quickly, and usually he's motioned out to roll out to the right or left when he does that, or just stick it to his running back, hand it off, or even with the zone read, he can pull it himself. He actually scored against Ohio State even with a bum knee on the zone read last year, and he's had 3 rushing touchdowns this season. So this is probably the most dynamic quarterback they've faced so far. Definitely not the most high profile. He's not like a surefire first rounder. Like I bet he'll go on day 2 of the draft, maybe day 3 this year. But he is someone to watch because he's dynamic and he can definitely hurt you with his legs.
It won't surprise me if he's a Miami Dolphin at this time next year.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think it would be cool. GOJ, guy's been here every week. Thanks for being here. The Buckeyes will play with 6 DBs, play a dime and get it done. I don't, and that's a great segue here. I don't know if Ohio State, I don't want to say I don't know if they can, because they could and stop Maryland, I think, and make sure to keep Taulia, at bay. But I don't think that you can just roll 6 DBs out there at all times because Roman Hemby's a pretty decent back. I trust Ohio State's front four, its linebackers to get it done with just the front. But Roman Hemby's pretty good, and I don't know if you're going to be able to just do that against this team, and that's what kind of makes them a little difficult to defend. Is just the way they run their offense, the way they go about their business is they're going to set up the run with the pass. They're going to throw it over the top. They're going to throw the screens. They're going to get you tired. Then they're going to hit you with Roman Hemby. That's the goal there of the Mike Locksley offense, of the former Dan Enos offense now with Josh Gaddis. I think he's the one who coined that term speed and space in Michigan. And it was a little screen happy, but that's what they do. And it works. So I'm not sure if 60 Bs is great, but I think that there is a case to be made where you'll see 60 Bs out there in certain situations for Ohio State.
Yeah, but as you were mentioning this week, this is one of the most physical secondaries you've seen at Ohio State, and Josh Proctor's seen at Ohio State since 2019. So as a 6 DB lineup, it's not like you're taking away from the run defense. You got hard hitters pretty much everywhere across the secondary. And maybe a dime package, maybe it shouldn't be the base on Saturday, but it's not a bad idea. I mean, you think about it, I remember when teams were trying to figure out how to defend Lamar Jackson, and Taulia Tagovailoa is not Lamar Jackson, but I remember there was really a strategy. I believe the Chargers even pulled it out in the playoffs with using 6 DBs and trying to limit Lamar that way in terms of being able to wrangle him up. I don't know, limit his mobility outside the pocket, have more DBs out there to limit some of those throws. Because look, if the longer you have to stick for these wide receivers, because if you buy time outside the pocket, you need guys that are lining up and covering. And I don't know, if you have some mismatches with a linebacker and a tight end, Corey Dyches is a good tight end for Maryland. That's going to task, I don't know, either Steele Chambers or Tommy Eichenberg to be sticking by him. Maybe having an extra DB in there helps with that kind of matchup. So it's not a bad idea at all. I think it's interesting to see how much we see of it. I feel like dime has been entertained by Jim Knowles at times, but we'll see what they do in terms of which personnel they deploy.
David Acuna says bye weeks always scare me. We tend to come out slow from the week off. Last year, that was absolutely the case, David. I mean, man, did we see a weird just half and half. Last year, Ohio State has the first 6 games in 6 weeks, takes a week off, and then really came out flat the next 6. It was weird. The offense was clicking those 5 weeks following the Notre Dame game. The offense was going crazy with some numbers. 77 against Toledo. I think they had 52 in a game in there. 49, 52 against Wisconsin, 49 against Rutgers and Michigan State. Then you come out, you think everything's okay, 54 against Iowa. But if you remember, like that game, the offense played okay. That's a good Iowa defense. The Penn State game, the offense looked really clunky. Then got really clunky. Northwestern, you think they're out of the funk uh, after Northwestern because they beat up on Indiana. But the Maryland game, the offense looked weird. We don't even need to revisit with these people watching right now the Michigan game. I think they would rather poke their own eyes out. And then all of a sudden, it's like, hey, the offense is back for Georgia. Yeah, it's point well taken. Like the bye week has not been friendly to Ohio State, especially last year. And so I think Ryan Day talked about that a little bit this week, tweaking a couple things, making sure that this team is locked in and focused, knowing that the job's not done just because they beat Notre Dame and got a week off. So I wouldn't expect that, but it's something to keep an eye on because if they come out slow, Maryland's going to make them pay. I don't think that this is a team you can come out slow against, Andy.
No, certainly not. Look, Maryland's beat its first 5 opponents by 18 plus points. I had a question for you though. Like, is there a week on the schedule you'd rather Ohio State have had the bye? Because there's always the question: is it too early? Did it come too late? Is there a week that you could kind of pinpoint and be like, hey, they probably could have used it here more?
Um, Maybe Halloween, but that's pretty late in the year. Um, like you don't. It's not great that you're playing Penn State at home and then going straight to Madison. It's not great that Penn State is off this week and then plays UMass before it comes to Columbus. And meanwhile, you've got to play Maryland and then go to Purdue, which again, I will keep saying it, a house of horrors. Like it's not great as far as like the matchup with Penn State, but like you're telling me that there's a better time to have an off week than right after you go on the road to a hostile environment, win a game with 1 second to go in the most emotional Ohio State win that I can remember, and then you got to turn around and play another game? No, no, I would not want that for this team. This team needed that week off. It needed that recharge, that reset. The shift in mindset, I think, is the biggest thing. Not just the rest and recovery, but the shift in the mindset of let's give ourselves maybe 1 day extra to celebrate this one. And after the off week, I think they were still celebrating it until Saturday, as if that was like there was 2 wins there. And then you could turn the page to Maryland officially. Some guys were even turning the page before that, but I think this team needed the off week, and I think it came at the perfect time. I know that you got 8 games in 8 weeks now, and 9 if you reach your goals because you're going to the Big Ten championship game if you reach all your goals. But I think they'll take take the off week when they got it.
Yeah, and for Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Like he goes
Yeah,
down against Notre Dame. He's arguably the most important player on this football team. We all know what they looked like without him against Georgia. This is a different group, but same impact for him. Having another week to rest the ankle, he's good to go. Obviously, it's not perfect. He said yesterday, talking to the media, that it's a worse injury than the one he had last year, which he really divulged to us earlier this season, that he had an ankle sprain last season, that he obviously fought through and was a Blitnikoff Award finalist and unanimous first team All American. So he's going to be fine to play. And I think having that extra week certainly helps. So that comes into play as well. I also think that for Ohio State, like there's not going to be a hangover of sorts. With other programs, when you have a kind of
no,
victory like that against Notre Dame, you might get a little bit worried. But I think for this kind of program, they know the drill. And Emeka Egbuka was talking about Maryland last Wednesday, not this Wednesday.
mm-hmm.
So they have this team on their antenna. They know what's coming. They know that the job's not finished. That's what Lathan Ransom said this week. Hey, job's not finished. He quoted Kobe Bryant, one of the best all-time quotes in a post-game press conference. They've got stuff to do from this point forward, especially this defense, which started off well last year too, and we all know how that ended.
Yeah, that's the difference though to me. Like we and I've talked about this. We were lazy last year, just as a conglomerate. I think not you. You weren't here, Andy. I won't fault you. It's not your fault, buddy. It's my fault. Ohio State gave up big plays against. They gave up one against Notre Dame, first play of the season last year. Ohio State gave up big plays to Toledo, time and time again. Daquan Finn and that offense beat them in the first half a couple different times. They gave up a couple of big plays. I think they gave up one to Rutgers. And then Penn State had a couple big plays, and we kind of just dismissed it because it was first year growing pains under Jim Knowles. And then all of a sudden we're like, well, where did this come from when it started to happen against Michigan? And we even dismissed it when it was Maryland because it was the week before the Michigan game. But then against Michigan, the big plays happen. It's like, what? Where did this come from? It's well, we should have seen it. The writing was on the wall. That was built. That was baked into the cake. At some point, it was going to happen last year, and it happened in the worst two spots, Michigan and Georgia. I'm not telling anybody some things they don't know, but that's the difference. Is through 4 games this year, we haven't really had anything to dismiss because there's been no flaws in the defense, in my opinion. Like maybe pass rush, but like so far, if you told me like something you were seriously concerned about with this defense, I don't think you could tell me something you're seriously concerned about. Is there like a real concern with this defense through 4 games? I don't think so. And they got a little worn down against Notre Dame. I think they learned their lesson. They'll probably sub a little bit more in the first half or in certain situations of bigger games moving forward because you could tell they were tired late. But other than that, like find a flaw in the defense. I don't, and I'm not saying they're perfect, but like through 4 games, you really are nitpicking to find defensive deficiencies. Whereas last year we should have seen it coming. The big plays were there, and we just chose to ignore them. And yeah, I'm choosing not to be lazy again this year, but also I'm not finding a lot of stuff to really nitpick on this defense.
Yeah, if we want to nitpick, like I can obviously this defense is playing well. You can't ask much more from this group. There are a few areas like if we're gonna be that person, I'll be that person for a second and nitpick.
Yeah,
Third down defense. I talked about it multiple times now. They need to be better at getting off the field to help this offense get more possessions. The offense needs to be much more efficient too. The red zone, on third down, on early downs, pretty much everywhere. But this defense can be more efficient as well. I also think that they can be more efficient in the red zone. I think they're 12th in the Big Ten right now in opponent red zone touchdown percentage. That's not very good. Tied 87th nationally in that department. So there are certain situational football downs, right? Whether it's third down, whether it's in the red zone, coaches love to key in on those defensively and offensively. Ohio State needs to be better defensively in both of those categories. So that's one thing to look at. I do think, though, that, I mean, that is nitpicking. Look, they've allowed 34 points. There's been 4 games. This defense has been very good. They have not allowed one play of 40 or more yards from scrimmage. And the 3 goals are to be good on third down, fourth down, and limit those explosive plays. They've done all 3 of those largely. And I think that you're going into week 6 now, knowing that, hey, this isn't a fluke. This is what we have right now. I guess my question is fatigue. Like, can they keep this up? Because, we were talking earlier this week with our colleague Tim May, and he was saying, well, time of possession doesn't matter. All right, in my head. And then I was like, well, it kind of does because your defense is on the field a lot more if you can't run the ball or you can't just control the clock. I know Ohio State can score in 10 seconds. I get that. But at a certain point, you do need to protect your defense because you don't want them on the field for 35 minutes a game. And Ohio State's 12th in the Big Ten in time of possession right now.
yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting argument for sure because like Ohio State had the ball for 10 fewer minutes than Notre Dame and ran one more play. So like, which defense is more tired? The Notre Dame defense for being out there for one more play, or the Ohio State defense for being out there for 10 more minutes? That comes down to, I don't really know what it comes down to, and like how you would decipher that. Like Notre Dame was obviously holding the ball longer and going down in the play clock longer, maybe even longer than I realized until I just looked at that stat just now. Youngstown State was doing the same thing. Indiana was going all the way down to 1 second before it snapped the ball. Like teams are doing that to Ohio State, and that's not by accident. So like, yeah, the time of possession, maybe that's just a point where maybe we'd have to ask Jim Knowles a little bit. But like, if you're only out there for 65 plays, but you're out there for 40 minutes, are you really that tired? Because it's a lot of standing around, even if it's on the field,
Yeah.
right? So, like, that's an interesting point because, you could tell that some of those defensive linemen were pretty tired toward the end of that game against Notre Dame. But also, like, JT Tuimoloau made the 2 biggest plays in the fourth quarter when he was probably the most tired. So, yeah, it's something to keep track of because if you start getting into like the 670 play mark and you don't have the ball for the time of possession advantage, then I think that's when you're starting to look at like, okay, like this defense is starting to wear down a little bit. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a good point you make, but then I'm thinking to myself, okay, the plays were similar, but Ohio State also had a 15-play final drive, and they were very close to not getting the ball back for that
Yeah.
15-play drive. So, like, if you take that away, which I know that's always the shouldn't take it away, it happened. But if you do, that looks pretty skewed. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's a question to ask Jim Knowles. It's a question to ask this staff, really, because, like, is that a concern? I don't know. Maybe it's just not on their radar. Maybe it's. I think last year they were seventh in the Big Ten in time possession. I don't ever expect them to be top five, even. But I certainly don't know if you want to be at the bottom of the Big Ten in that category. So I don't know. Like, because it could. Again, Ohio State's going to score fast. Like, they love the 1, 2, 3 play drives. Like, that's just the way it is. This offense is explosive. It should be. So, yeah, I don't know. Just crossed my mind this week. That's all.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Again, because if you get into the 10-minute disadvantage on time of possession and you're out there for 75 or 80 plays, then you're in trouble. Because then you're talking about wearing down. And that's like, look at it this way. I'm not comparing Ohio State's offense to Iowa's offense. I pinky promise everybody, please. Just give me a second here. Like, Penn State ran 97 plays against Iowa. Iowa ran 39. That's insane, right? So, like, Iowa's defense was terribly tired. And that's because its offense was trash. But, like, in a clock game, the way that the clock runs now in college football, those kind of games, like, can happen where, like, you're
Yeah.
only running 40 plays and the other team is running 80. And, it's always funny last year to see when Ohio State would have 42 points and 41 plays, or Ohio State would have, 7 plays and 21 points. Um, but I don't know if this offense is going to do that, and maybe it will because maybe it's turned a corner, which leads us into another conversation here. Um, but I just think that, like, the new clock rules, the plays, the time of possession, like, all of that factors into you know the ceiling almost of, like, what this defense can be, and I guess what this offense can be, because, like, what this team can be really. Like, the clock rules play into this team a lot more than I expected it to, and maybe a lot more than other teams around the country, because other teams respect this Ohio State offense so much that they're willing to hold the ball longer than they're supposed to. Western Kentucky does not care about time of possession. They don't care about holding the ball. They were even milking the clock a little bit against Ohio State. That tells you everything you need to know about how this clock rule is affecting the Buckeyes more than it is other teams.
Yeah. Hey, look, we're gonna see this week because those two categories I mentioned: red zone defense, third down defense. Maryland is 18th in the country, second in the Big Ten, and third down conversion percentage, and they are 31st nationally and sixth in the Big Ten in red zone touchdown percentage. So this Ohio State defense will get tested if they hold up. Again, we say this every week. This is the test. This is the test. This is the test. But I feel like that's how it has to be. Like, with this defense, the way they played last year, the way they started, and the way they finished, it almost demands that every game is a referendum this year. Like, that's just it's going to be the way it is. When you have a collapse like that at the end of the year, that's what you get the next year. Is every
Mm-hmm.
week you're checking in. Are they still good? Are they still good? And I think that's fair. The way that happened, like, we wouldn't be doing our jobs right if we were like, this defense is fine, no hiccups, no concerns whatsoever. I think that it's been great so far, and these players have played their butts off to this point. But there are some points, as we just talked about, that are like, yeah, I don't know. Well, let's see.
Yeah, the jury's still out on very small select sections of this defense, and I'm willing to say that we will find out soon enough. So here I'm going to do this because we can do this with graphics now. I asked, can Ohio State slow down Taulia? Next question: can Maryland slow down Ohio State? Because I've seen a lot of conversation with the national media. I'm a podcast guy. I listen to a lot of shows. I try to take in a lot. And everybody wants to know if Ohio State's defense is for real and if it can stop Taulia. Can Maryland stop Ohio State? Like, are we just forgetting about the other side of the ball? And I know Ohio State's offense hasn't been Ohio State's offense here for this year so far. But Kyle McCord just orchestrated a 5 for 13. We won't talk about that. A really nice drive to beat Notre Dame on the road. And that's a confidence booster. Chip Traynor just scored a game-winning touchdown. That's a confidence booster. Travion Henderson had a 61-yard touchdown run, his longest of the year. Like, all of these things that happened with Emeka Ibuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. even, like, everything built a lot of confidence for this team. Who's to say this offense isn't going to take the next step forward and start to show signs that it's pretty explosive, down in and down out. This is probably the perfect opponent to unleash that with, just because I'm not sure how great Maryland is, but I know that the safety's pretty good. His name is slipping my mind, and the corners aren't bad. So can Maryland slow down Ohio State, Andy?
Yeah, it's the question, right? I mean, you mentioned like they've got some good players on this team. When I look at this team, like you mentioned, the corners, you got Tarheeb Still, Jaquan Shepard. They both kind of pop off the page for me. They're both pretty good defensive backs. Again, Maryland, I think it was Deontay Banks that they lost to the draft last year that Marvin Harrison talked about. Like that was his toughest cover last year in College
Hmm.
Park. So this is a good Maryland program that's producing at these important positions offensively and defensively. Then on the defensive line, like, I don't know. How is this offensive line for Ohio State going to fare after struggling in the run game last time out against Notre Dame? This defensive line for Maryland isn't great, but it's not bad either. Like there's some guys, Donnell Brown is one that comes to mind for Maryland that's good at kind of wreaking havoc on the interior. I think he's got 13 pressures this year, and he's also been kind of a force in run defense. So there are players here on the Maryland defense that they can kind of raise some eyebrows. I think the question more is always Ohio State versus Ohio State. And can they, not shoot themselves in the foot, whether it's penalties, whether it's just kind of head scratching first and second downs, because that was the problem against Notre Dame, where they moved the ball by and large very well in that game and then came up empty on two red zone trips. You had the 4th and 1 with, you have the Maya Williams run on 3rd and 1, and then on 4th and 1, you have 3 tight ends and 23 personnel, and just really doesn't go anywhere. Incomplete pass to Kate Stover. And then the second time, you go jet sweep to the boundary. We all talked about it. We know that happened on 4th and 1 as well. So those are 2 empty possessions. They could have scored points. So the 17 is a little bit misleading. It also could have been 10 points they could have finished with, but it could have very well been like 30 points, if you
Hmm.
will, at Notre Dame. So there's not, again, it's a game of inches. It could be, a couple of plays away from a good scoring day, a couple of plays away from a bad scoring day. I think that Maryland is not equipped to slow down this Ohio State defense, or this Ohio State offense, but is Ohio State equipped to not shoot itself in the foot? And I think that's more of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think you're correct in that assessment. Ohio State will be able to move the ball. Uh, Another good comment here. Like Michigan State didn't have trouble moving the football on this team. Like they didn't. They outgained Maryland. That box score is so bananas when you know that it's a 31-9 final score. Because Noah Kim didn't play terribly except he had the picks. But he had 190 yards passing. As a team, Michigan State had 274 yards passing on Maryland. Actually, as a team, they out threw Taulia, which if you would have showed me 31-9, I would have said, yeah, Taulia probably lit it up. And Michigan State couldn't do anything with the football. Michigan State was able to run the ball a little bit inside on this defense. Like it's not a great run defense. It's also just it's okay against the pass. Like you said, like if Ohio State doesn't shoot itself in the foot, it just can finish drives, and that doesn't mean in the red zone because Ohio State would probably prefer not to get into the red zone. They would prefer to just score before they get there and avoid those issues altogether. This is the kind of team you could do that against. Michigan State is not an explosive team at all. Had completions of 33 and 28. Like you can make some hay against this secondary. It's not the worst secondary Ohio State's going to see all year. I think we're already past that with Western Kentucky. But like you're going to be able to move the ball. And then, like you said, it's all about capitalizing. It's all about when you get inside the 40, basically, are you finishing drives or are you not? And that's got to be something that they've got to shore up here with this offense. Kyle McCord is a good quarterback. I've seen enough to say that he's good. If he's great, that means that he's putting the ball in the end zone. And this offense needs to do that more than it has been.
Yeah, absolutely. I just looked it up. Maryland's given up 10 pass plays of 20 or more yards this year. I think that's fifth in the Big Ten. So they're not terrible in that category, but they're not like perfect by any means. So
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely cracks in that defense. I think that, again, go back to the point we've been hammering home. This is about Kyle McCord. This is about this offensive line. This is about these wide receivers and running backs capitalizing on the opportunity whenever they get possessions because we don't know how many they're going to get. As much as I think that Maryland isn't going to try to play the possession game because it's not their game, Maybe they do. And if Ohio State only gets 8 to 10 possessions, like that's been the case this season, are they going to be able to score touchdowns on 65% of them, 66.6, whatever you like? So let's say they go, let's say maybe you aim for 6, if you get 8 possessions, 6 touchdowns, like that would be a successful day for Ohio State. You know, 42
Mhm.
points, you don't factor in a defensive touchdown. Can they be that efficient? I mean, that's what people are used to with that scoring number. That's the measure for me. You know, like I think Ohio State's going to win this game. That's not really what I'm looking for. I'm not discounting Maryland. I'm actually probably one of the more, hey, Maryland's a team to watch out for in the Big Ten this year. I just think that what I'm watching for is how badly can Ohio State beat Maryland if they do? And that's what I'm looking for. That's the litmus test for me because this team has not put up numbers on power conference teams so far. They put up 63 on Western Kentucky, and they put up 35 in Youngstown State, an FCS team. They scored 17 against Notre Dame, and they scored 23 against Indiana in the season opener. So we have yet to see this offensive explosion, which we all know is possible against a power conference team. And I think that's the storyline for me. In addition to like, hey, can Maryland hang with this team? Because Maryland is a good team. But if they can't, how much of a distance does Ohio State create between them?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you can make excuses for this Ohio State offense if you like. Like against Indiana, you can say, "Well, it was the first time starting quarterback on the road in a Big Ten game, and that's a Big Ten defense, no matter how you slice it." And uh, yada yada yada. Like he wasn't the official starter yet, so it was still a little, jumpy on how it was going to go. And then against Youngstown State, you could say the same thing. Like, oh, he still wasn't declared the starter, and Devin Brown played a little bit, and then get into Notre Dame, and hey, it was a big time rock fight in a big time environment. You do whatever it takes to win, and but neither team scored very well, even though Sam Hartman's a good quarterback and Notre Dame has a good offense, but they didn't score either. I'm willing to listen to all those. I'm willing to even entertain all of those, but at some point, like the rubber has to meet the road. You got to go score some points. And so, like you said, like put some distance between yourself. I said it against Youngstown State, and Ohio State didn't do it. If you are Ohio State, act like it. Like if you're Ohio State and this team is Maryland, I understand this is a decent Maryland team, but act like it. Like you want to be considered a national title contender, act like it. People are starting to see what Michigan's doing, did to Nebraska last week. They see that Penn State's coming to town in a couple weeks. It's time for Ohio State, I think, to start acting like Ohio State in a game like this. This is the perfect showcase right off the off week. People will still have you still have people's attention from the Notre Dame win. It's at home on homecoming. There's going to be 100,000 people there. It's on big noon kickoff, so there's going to be a pretty hefty audience watching this game. Like, and that's Ohio State all the time. This isn't like a high school team that's finally getting on ESPN. Like, obviously, all of these things are always true, but like this seems like the perfect showcase game where like if your offense is what you think it can be, it's a great time to show it.
Yeah, and here's the question: like, if you're a Ohio State fan, and people in the comments, if you're a fan of this team, I want to hear it. Like, if you're a Ohio State fan, or even if you're someone that evaluates this team, like we do on a week to week basis, are you more content with seeing this team score like 45 points but give up maybe 25 to 30? Or if they only score 28 to 31, but they give up 10? Because, like, what do you want to see more? This defense, obviously you'd want to see both, right? If you're a fan, you'd want to see 45 to 10,
Perfect world.
right? Right. But if you have to choose between the two, what are you going to be more happy with coming out of week 6? The offense finally erupting against a Power 5 team. Hey, by the way, Maryland's only given up 13 some points per game. This is not a
Mm-hmm.
bad Maryland defense. I know their schedule hasn't been super tough, but this defense has been playing Maryland defenses do. So are you
Mm-hmm.
excited about Ohio State scoring 40 plus? Or would you rather this defense continue to shut down teams and not give up touchdowns more than 2 yards long?
Yeah, 2 yards. That's such a crazy stat. Had to Nathan Baird from Cleveland.com for figuring that out before any of us did. It's just an insane stat. The 2 yards. Um, but yeah, it's a it's an adjustment for these Ohio State fans, right? Like you get so used to seeing what Justin Fields and CJ Stroud are doing, and I think Kyle McCord has a chance to be a first round pick after a couple years as a starter. Full disclosure, like that's where I think he should be after 2 years as a starter at Ohio State. But after 2 years, I don't know if it's going to happen after this year. But he can still explode. He has 10 games to do it. If Ohio 11 games to do it, if Ohio State reaches its goals, And you know, I did the stupid thing last week. Remember when I showed you Joe Burrow's first four starts, and then I showed you Kyle McCord's first four starts, and uh, McCord's stats were better, and I said that this is how you don't know because we had no clue what Joe like. You don't know what Kyle McCord is still really. Like you still, it's 4 games into CJ Stroud's career. He already had a loss, so you know, like it's just crazy. Like we just don't know still, and it's just an adjustment to see a team win with defense when you're so used to seeing it win with offense. Like imagine seeing USC right now win with defense. No, like I can't even picture
I
that.
can't.
So
Yeah, I
like
can't.
to have it be the Scarlet and Gray winning with defense, like we haven't seen that in a few years. They won a couple games with defense in 2014. They won a couple games. They won a lot of games with defense in 2016. Man, that offense was rough. But like it's been a while, and so it's just a different attitude, and I think that the attitude is reflecting with this Ohio State defense that knows that it can win games with defense, and there's something to be said for a defense that knows it can win games, not just a team that knows it can win. But there's something to be said about that dog mentality that I'm going to write about on Friday for LettermenRow.com. Like once you get that and you realize it, it's a pretty dangerous drug to be on. And this team is well equipped to be able to do those things right now on the defensive side. But if that offense comes along, that's what we're all waiting on, and that's what could really make this team scary. Is if the offense starts to produce at a high clip as well.
Yeah, and how about the offense you get, or the confidence you get as the offense, knowing that your defense is playing as well as it is? For Kyle McCord, he doesn't have to be perfect or even close to it. He can take some shots. Like quarterbacks have more confidence when they know their defense has their back. If you got to score a touchdown every drive to stay in a game or win a game, which that hasn't necessarily been the case for Ohio State. But you look back at 2021, like 28 wasn't enough against Oregon. CJ Stroud basically like rewrote the record book in that game, threw for something like 400 and 80 yards against Oregon and still didn't win that game.
484.
Yeah, so like that's that scenario, right? Where the pressure's on to do something every drive, and CJ thrived, and it's why he's doing so well in the NFL right now. He's just built for it. But like Kyle McCord isn't under that same pressure. Yeah, he still had pressure. That final drive against Notre Dame is maybe the most pressure you could ever face as a college football quarterback outside of a national title game. But look, it's not like he's going in every drive needing to score a touchdown. And it's not like he doesn't want to. I'm just saying that you can play with some more confidence. Like you don't need to be on pins and needles. Like you can actually take shots down the field knowing, hey, I can afford that because I don't need to be picture perfect. My defense has my back. So I think I'd like to see McCord in this offense take some more shots. I'd like to see more of those 1 to 2, 3 play scoring drives like we saw against Western Kentucky. Translate that to the Big Ten, and then we're talking about a team that's more well-rounded, a team that could be, a national title contender.
Andy, I came to a decision this week. I'm at peace with myself. I have become a pressures guy over a sacks guy. So now here's a great question from a name that somebody might recognize from this. Let's discuss the lack of sacks from a defensive end. Should we, as fans, be concerned about the lack of sacks? I say no for now. But there's also the very small possibility that this defense at some point gets bit by not getting a quarterback to the ground, like not sacking JJ McCarthy, letting him throw on 3rd and 10, having the receiver break a tackle and run for 60 some yards for a touchdown to make it 7-7. Oops. Like those are possibilities that can happen. So like, are you concerned about the lack of sacks, even though the pressure numbers are as good as any team is in the country?
It depends how quickly teams are getting the ball out, because when you're playing Western Kentucky and Austin Reed's getting it out 2.2 seconds per drop back, I'm not concerned about it because Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau set career highs in single game pressures that game. And then when Sam Hartman's only averaging 2.84 seconds per drop back on his throws, I'm also not really worrying about it. There was pressure on him at times and even at the most critical of times. But if Taulia Tungavailoa is averaging like more than 3 seconds per throw on his dropbacks, especially when he's out of the pocket and he's extending plays and they get a pressure but not a sack, that's when you worry about it because he's taking time to set up things downfield. You can't rely on your defensive backs to hold coverage 5, 6 seconds or whatever it is, maybe even 3 or 4. You can't rely on that all the time. And that's when it's a problem because it doesn't matter if you get a pressure in that situation because the play is taking longer to develop and you're going to get something downfield every once in a while. So this week, I am looking for it, especially if Taulia keeps playing like he is, which is a lot of extending plays outside of the pocket.
Yeah, the containment first philosophy has worked well so far. It does show tremendous belief in the secondary, and this secondary has earned that belief. Like right now, this secondary is playing at a level that a lot of folks do not realize, and I'm very comfortable saying that. This is a secondary that means business. Josh Proctor said they have the dog in them. I'm going to have a story about the secondary uh, for LettermenRow.com on Friday, but like the defensive front is forcing guys to throw early because they have respect for JT and Jack. And Mike Locksley talked about that in his press conference this week. The secondary is putting pressure on quarterbacks to be perfect because if you're not, they're going to make you pay because the secondary is like glue right now. And that's a very, very dangerous combination. The phrase that Jim Knowles has been using is coverage and rush, and then the team says back to him working together. And I think there's again, belief is a drug. And if you get it, like it can really fuel what this defense wants to be. And the secondary believes in themselves more than any secondary I've seen in this program since 2019. And that was a secondary that had Jordan Fuller and Damon Arnett and Jeff Okuda, all guys who, and Sean Wade, all guys who kind of got it. If you know what I mean, like they got it, but they also like could bring it. And this secondary, I think, just flat out brings it. And they're not willing to do the dirty work. They're more than willing to do the dirty work, but they're also more than willing to be a little flashy along the way and show off when they make a play. And I think that is a very dangerous combination for offenses. And it's great for Ohio State right now. And it's keeping quarterbacks on their toes at all times, even with the early throws, like in the quick throws. Like you have to kind of be a little concerned when you're throwing into the secondary right now.
Yeah, what a great group of personalities. I mean, Denzel Burke
Yeah.
loves to talk trash. Davis Igbenogson definitely can talk his talk too and backs it up with some physical play. Uh, Good in run defense too. All those defensive backs. Denzel Burke's forced to fumble. Jordan Hancock's forced to fumble. Davis Igbenogson's always in on tackles. So like, and those safeties, right? Lathan Ransom had 13 tackles against Notre Dame. Was the defensive player of the week for the Big Ten. Was in on that 4th-and-1 sneak with Sonny Styles to stop that. Josh Proctor, as you mentioned, I was looking back at this schedule. You talk about belief as a drug and how it's so important for confidence. We might look back at this season, especially with this defense in the secondary, thinking like Indiana was the best matchup they could have ever had. Big Ten game on the road, and they come out with the triple option. Because even if they didn't have to really play against the pass, it was still a confidence boost for the secondary to be like, hey, we shut them down. And it doesn't matter what kind of offense they played. In 5 years, no one's going to remember that, you know? It's that they set the tone and they started to buy in that they could do that. And then it built, and then it built, and then it built. So, like, I just looking back at the schedule, and I remember when this offseason came around, we were talking about the schedule, like, oh, I don't know, the first couple of weeks, Indiana, Western Kentucky. Looking back, like, that schedule was probably the best thing that could have happened to this Ohio State team.
Yeah, and the secondary has just improved each week, and they haven't played a receiver. Malachi Corley's good, but he's screen pass good, man. Like he gets the ball quickly and then he goes. And they weren't really challenged vertically by him. Like you're not going to be challenged vertically by a lot of guys on this schedule. I'm not really sure where that happens, other than maybe this week with Caden Prather and a couple of those other guys. Like they will challenge you, but if you live up to the challenge this week, then we'll start to talk about okay, which one of these guys is an All American? Which one of these guys is going to be All Big Ten? Because that the conversation is quickly shifting from hey, this secondary is pretty good to hey, this secondary's got a couple All Americans in it. And if it happens this week, I'm going to be more than willing to entertain that idea as the Buckeyes get ready for week 6 with Maryland. Got about 5 minutes left here, Andy. What are you watching? What's on your brain here? College football that's not Ohio State. We're so deep into Ohio State, Maryland. Ohio State third down success, the secondary, Ohio State against Taulia. Like, been producing a lot of stuff at LettermenRow.com. You can get that for $1 for the first month right now. But like, I don't know, man. Like, there's a lot of good college football on this weekend. I'm pretty excited about the weekend in general, not just what's going to happen in the Horseshoe at noon.
Yeah, I'll run through a few games. Like Oklahoma, Texas, of course. Everyone's going to be
Yeah.
watching that one. And kind of bummed out that intersects with Ohio State. Maryland, I guess everyone watching this probably won't be watching it, but I'm going to definitely have that up somewhere on my computer list of tabs, which Spencer always makes fun of me for. There's definitely going to be something going on with keeping an eye on that game. I think everyone in the college football world will be watching that. Otherwise, LSU, Missouri. Missouri is 5-0. I don't think LSU is for real. We've kind of bashed them this week, thinking that Maryland should be ranked over them. I agree with that. Interested to see if Missouri goes to 6-0 under Eli Drinkwitz. Also, then we got to go down the schedule 20v1 matchup with Kentucky, Georgia. Curious to see if Georgia gets another scare after last respond. Right now, if they lose a game, I feel like they're out of the top 4 at least. Like they have not looked very impressive, but they're the back-to-back defending national champs and still undefeated. And then round out this list would probably, for me, Notre Dame, Louisville. Louisville is one of 5 ACC teams ranked right now. They're number 25, hanging on the AP top 25 against Notre Dame that's still 10th nationally. If you're an Ohio State fan, you want Notre Dame to win as many games as possible to boost Ohio State's resume for the CFP. But I'm unsure if they'll be able to do that considering the way they've looked offensively the last couple of weeks. I know part of that was playing an Ohio State defense that's pretty darn good. But they didn't look great against Duke, and now they get a Louisville team that's pretty hot under Jeff
Yeah.
Brom, I should say. Yeah.
Andy, OU Texas is going to be a blast. Like those two teams are 5-0. Like they both believe that this is the year to get that momentum and head into the SEC. Like man, that you talk about a fun game. Like why can't we? The one time I want an Ohio State night game so I can watch Red River before I go to the stadium, and nah, Fox says no. You will cover this game at noon. Big noon kickoff will be in town, and I say okay, that's fine, Fox. You can have your way. I don't have a say because I don't pay the Big Ten $70 million. The picks though, man. We started off 2-0 last weekend. We hit Oregon State, the Beavs, our Beavs -3.5. We also hit BYU plus the 1.5 against Cincinnati. Wrong team was favored there. And then it all came crashing down. We went 1-4 the rest of the way. So we finished the weekend 3-4. I know this is your favorite part of the week when I just ramble about my picks. But let's try and make some money here. Over 64.5 in LSU and Missouri. LSU, you going to cover anybody? 55 points to an Ole Miss team that scored 10 on Alabama. Are you kidding me? I don't think they are because Luther Burden is awesome. He's probably the best receiver in the SEC. That's a pretty bold claim, but he's really, really good. And LSU can't cover anything. I like to say LSU can't cover an ATM charge. Like that team is bad on defense. So I'll take the over in that one. I still think Missouri's going to win, but the official play here is the over. The Boston College money line, Andy, against Army. Boston College, wrong team favored. Boston College is going to beat Army at West Point. I'm sorry, troops. The American flag is behind me. I love the troops, but the Eagles going to get it done. Notre Dame over 53.5 with Louisville. It's a little bit of just a weird play for me. Like I think Notre Dame's going to be able to score a little bit more on Louisville, and then Notre Dame's going to be tired. I think Louisville's going to be able to score. 2 more. Texas Tech -1.5 against Baylor. Baylor got lucky last week, came back against UCF, who kind of just collapsed in the fourth quarter. Baylor stinks. Okay, Texas Tech's going to win in Waco, and then Arizona +21.5 against USC. If you get a 3-score spread with USC, just take the points, okay? Because I don't trust anything that has to do with USC's defense. Alex Grinch, Domani Jackson, Bear Alexander. I don't care. I don't care how much talent they have. They stink. So Arizona plus the 21.5 because even in the fourth quarter, Colorado showed you can score on this defense. Any qualms with the plays I got there, Andy?
No, I mean look, USC when it was 34-7, I turned it off. I went to a different game, and I was just like, "This is disappointing." I thought this game was going to be more entertaining. Then I went back, and I think it was like 48-34. I watched that final touchdown drive. That defense, as you mentioned, just so bad. Yeah, your other picks, I'm down with it. I don't know about BC and Army. West Point, man, that seems like a hard place to play. A good stadium to go to. I want to go there at some point. That's one that I feel like is on my bucket list. All those service academies. Annapolis is beautiful as well. And Air Force, I feel like would be cool to see. So I like the games you picked. Let's see if you get better than 3-4, but certainly better than I could do for
We
sure.
got a hater here. We got a hater just because I'm 3-4. We're gonna have a winning record. I got 5 plays this week. You think we can go 3-2 at least? Get a winning record?
You got to get back to 500 somehow, right?
One game at a time. As the
Yeah.
Mariners? The Mariners GM said we're just trying to go 54% over a 10-year period, so the fans should be happy that we're setting the standard for them. That's what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to go 50%. I'm setting the standard for you guys. Don't listen to me if you think I'm an idiot.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. Man, I'm excited for this week. I think that it's been too much Notre Dame talk. That was a great game, historic. I'll always remember it being there. But I am ready for another game to be played. I'm ready for
Yeah,
that game to be behind and just focus on what's ahead. And I think that this game against Maryland is going to be really intriguing. And if it's a close game, Ohio State fans shouldn't feel bad either. Like, this is a good Maryland team. Obviously, time will be the judge of that. But don't be surprised if Maryland wins 9 games this year. And you might be rooting for them. Actually, you will be rooting for them late in the season when they host both Penn State and Michigan, including the week before Ohio State goes to Ann Arbor to play Michigan. They're playing the Wolverines in College Park.
yeah, it's going to be great. Ohio State, Maryland, noon on Fox. Lettermen Row will be there. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. Become a Lettermen Row member. $1 for your first month. Then we'll talk about the pricing after that. That's Andy Baxter on the other side of that screen. You already knew that, though, because you just watched an hour of Letterman Live with Andy and Spencer. Thanks for being here. We'll be here next Thursday night, 6:30 p.m. sharp Eastern Standard Time to talk about the Buckeyes. They're going to travel to Purdue next week. We got to get this Maryland game out of the way first. We'll see you guys in the horseshoe on Saturday.